All right. So super excited to be here today with Sammy Grover, one of my favorite people on the planet.
Oh,
So thought maybe we'd start out, Sammy, with you introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your new book.
thanks for having me. You're one of my favorite people too. And I'm not saying that just because you said it first. We're all climate hypocrites now. we're we're all climate hypocrites now. Essentially, it came out of this sort of frustration around the conversations we have around personal responsibility and climate change. Right. On the one hand, there's this sort of perception, certainly in the outside world and in parts of the environmental movement, where you can't be an environmentalist unless you're a vegan. You can't be an environmentalist and fly. You can't be an environmentalist and eat meat. You can't be an environmentalist and drive a car. And my thinking is the only reason why you can't be an environmentalist is if you tell other people that they can't be an environmentalist. I think there is a really encouraging trend within the climate world for people to actually talk about how they feel about this.
One of my favorite things in reading the book is, eco anxiety is real. Climate anxiety is real. And watching so many, especially young people, really getting depressed and just feeling like we're never going to fix this and kind of going into these dark places. You bring this level of lightness in a good way. Have you struggled with that eco anxiety, or what's your kind of secret sauce for for in this area?
There's two types of anxiety that comes to mind. I don't know if I'd call them both anxiety. One is anxiety, right? Is that we look at the science, we look at the world my kids will inherit, and it's scary, and there's impacts that are going to be felt really hard by a lot of communities and a lot of countries. And then there's also just this guilt. I need to take a short shower, or I should be moving to that vegan diet, or I shouldn't be ever driving my car, or whatever. And I think both of those things in healthy doses are actually useful, right? It's useful to be somewhat scared. Our fear can call us to action. I did hit this point at one point where I was just going to bed when the sun went down. I would go to bed and turn the lights out because I didn't want to use any electricity. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily if that's what you want to do, as long as it's not making you sad and miserable and lonely like it was with me. If it's making you sad and miserable and lonely, then it's probably not. It's probably going to get in the way of you essentially being your best self and doing the most good you can do. So I'm trying to shift from that idea of being less bad to doing the most possible good that you can do.
What is the role for an individual in this work? And then how do we overcome the kind of stereotypical American individualism in that?
Yeah, so the role of the individual goes back to this idea of doing the most possible good that you can do, right? And that's going to be different for each person. So for some people, it may well be like there are really good people doing really good work on reducing their own personal carbon footprint to as small as they possibly can, and then communicating that out and sort of letting the rest of us know what they've learned. I think there's massive value in that, right? What I'm comfortable saying is like you need to play through what you are doing, whether what you are doing is the most impactful it can be. So if you're a writer, write. If you are a member of a church group, then apply yourself there. And I think almost inherently that brings about this idea of getting past that lens of individualism. I think there's also a lot of community in America, just as there is everywhere else, and there's a lot of individualism, certainly throughout Western culture. The most important thing you can do as an individual is to think about yourself less as an individual. Once you look at the undeniable scientific truth that we are all interconnected, not just with each other as humans, but with the entire planetary ecosystem, you start to see the connections of where you can start moving everything in a less destructive direction.
So what motivates you the most to do the work?
Part of it is guilt and fear, honestly, but there is there's an inherent kind of like, it's just what I like doing. Right. I think it's really interesting. I love being out in nature. I love being out in forests. I love learning about solar power. I love nerdy electric car stuff. I love riding a bike. So there's a lot of stuff that just motivates me because it's just I find it a better way to live. I don't love how stupid our current system is, for want of a better word, the waste and the sort of the brute force of like, oh, here's a problem, let's throw fossil fuels at it. I quite like the space to just rethink a lot of the paradigms of this norm that wasn't working out very well for a lot of people anyway. I like the idea of building something better, and I think we all have this role to play. And then the other part is just I'm really motivated by just meeting other people who are into that, right? So all of our lovely Dogwood people, you get to meet all these people from all kinds of different backgrounds and different interests and different disciplines, and they're all motivated by the same idea of just like, God damn, I like forests, right? Or I like a livable future in a reasonable climate. And that's true across like the climate movement. As people think about it as this thing you don't want to think about, right? Climate change, oh, it's scary. And that's why a lot of people look away. But actually what I've found is people who've actually stepped into action, they're often the funnest people, right? They got a good sense of humor. And I don't spend a lot of time sitting here worrying about, the apocalypse.
So I'm curious about how you feel like, in terms of crafting messages or telling stories, what are the kind of elements to it that help us mobilize a movement, the kind of movement that we need right now?
The best answer I have to that is that I think completeness. It's a little like when we talk about which emotions are appropriate to feel around climate change, or whether we're going to talk about science or policy or whatever. We need to talk about all of it. And it's the same in communications. We need to use all of those tools, right? Humor is this powerful tool. Anger is definitely a powerful tool that we do not use enough of. It's okay to talk about our emotions. It's okay to talk about how we feel. It's okay to sort of reveal what we don't know. I started working with Dogwood in whenever the Kentucky Fried Forests campaign was, I
2005-ish.
That sounds about right. I was relatively new to the United States, relatively new to branding work, and there was this authenticity of like a group of very committed, very values driven. Many of you were vegans and sort of like exactly the kind of crunchier end of the environmental movement that I've grown up with and am quite comfortable with. But throughout, there was this sense of real comfort in moving between worlds, right? Of building grassroots organizations, and also of stepping into the boardroom and of keeping a goal in mind. You have been willing to have some really tough conversations and center those conversations and share power with other organizations when we're not the right people to be taking on a problem.
If we bring it back to the context of the climate crisis, what vital role do you see our organization playing on that issue right now?
What we are called to do, I should say, right, is that one is placing the Southern United States in a central point of the conversation, because we are an often overlooked region. So putting the South back in a conversation about what it looks like to create a more just society, right, which includes a more ecologically sane society. That is one thing. And then the other is this idea of the climate crisis it sometimes gets boiled down to carbon, right? Carbon and methane. But we also, at the same time, we have to contend with a biodiversity crisis, right? We have to deal with marginalization of communities and extractive industries that have really, destroyed how people make a living. We got to do all of these things. And it turns out that forests are a really good place to do that, right? There's all these ways that forests benefit communities. How do we reconnect in real ways, real and reciprocal ways with the ecosystems that we cannot survive without, right? And that means really taking care of communities that live around these forests. It means listening to those communities, empowering those communities, and then it means regenerating our forests. It means reimagining what a sane forest economy looks like. But it's interesting to be an organization that's been doing this for 25 years. We've learned how to win. We've got significant victories under our belt. We've grown tremendously. And now we're stepping into this moment where the climate crisis is really coming to a head. That's kind of the task I see ahead of us, is we have to take the traditions we've built. Honestly, we got to do more of it faster, bigger, and better than we ever have before. But I think we have a lot of muscle that we've sort of begun to exercise. Now it's really sort of bulking that muscle and scaling up the work. We have no choice but to accept that we live these really high carbon lifestyles. There is a case to be made that we need to acknowledge that. It doesn't mean we have to feel bad about it. We didn't choose to, tank the Kyoto Protocol. We didn't choose to, sell up our rail system or like prioritize suburban planning or, gerrymander our districts out of any kind of sensible political representation. But the result of those things is that we are disproportionately, as individuals, contributing to a global problem that is killing people right now. So we do have a moral responsibility to figure out, like, what's my role in what's my best role in figuring it out. One of the best things you can do is to support great organizations like Dogwood Alliance.
Oh man, I really appreciate it. It's been a super fun time, and
always
pleasure talking to you.
Well, next time let's do beer.
Yeah.